Have you ever felt your mood sink because of an offhand comment, a delayed message, or just a strange look from someone? In that moment, you seem to become a different person, confused, angry, lost in spiraling thoughts. But pause and ask yourself, is the world truly against you, or are you simply letting your mind be ruled by old reflexes? In a world that grows louder and more easily provoked, there are those who remain remarkably composed. They are not indifferent. They've simply learned something most of us were never taught. Emotional control doesn't come from suppression, but from seeing clearly what is real and what is merely a story we've told ourselves. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold. It teaches us to master our response so that nothing and no one can touch us unless we allow it. 1. You don't react to events. You react to how you interpret them. So often in life, we believe that it's someone else's actions that hurt us. A cold glance, a curt reply, an unreadable expression, and suddenly we feel shattered, angry, or anxious. But if you pause and look more closely, you'll see that what causes pain isn't the event itself, it's the story you tell yourself about it. A friend hasn't replied to your message for 2 days. You immediately assume, they must be avoiding me, or worse, did I do something wrong? But have you ever stopped and asked, maybe they're just busy, exhausted, or haven't seen the message yet? It's not their silence that wounds you, it's the meaning you attach to it. Stoicism calls this judgment, not in the moral sense, but the way we assign meaning to neutral events. An event, by nature, carries no emotional weight, but when filtered through our lens, distorted by old memories, unhealed wounds, and unconscious biases, it becomes something painful. An innocent question like, "How have you been?" can feel invasive to someone who's been abandoned. A sincere comment can sound like an attack to someone used to criticism. The human mind rarely reacts to objective reality. It reacts to the version of reality it invents. This may sound abstract, but it's easily verified. A content person won't blink at an offhand remark, but someone unsettled will frown, grow suspicious, and search for hidden meanings. The difference lies not in the words spoken, but in the listener. Recognizing this is the first step to escaping the emotional loops we trap ourselves in. When you stop asking, "Why did they do that?" and start asking, "Why do I feel this way?" you shift your focus from the outside world to within. And that's where your true power begins. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What you mistake as instinct is often the result of years of conditioning. These automatic reactions are scripts written in childhood, born from wounds never addressed. And if you don't become aware of them, you'll go on living as if the world is against you, when in truth, the real enemy is an unchecked, distorted perspective. So instead of reacting the moment something offends you, try pausing and asking, what meaning am I assigning to this? Someone doesn't greet you. It might be because they're distracted, didn't see you, or are simply stressed, but you assume they're looking down on you. Someone gives feedback. You think they dislike you when perhaps they care. In every instance, your emotional surge doesn't come from the event, but from the story you told yourself. And every story is a choice, one that can be rewritten if you're present enough to notice you're the one writing it. Don't live like a puppet pulled by every passing circumstance. Live like a conscious storyteller. Because when you control the story, you control the emotion that follows. And when you control the emotion, you are no longer at the mercy of the outside world. You stop being easily triggered by small things. You become unshakable, not because the world has grown gentler, but because you've learned to see it with greater clarity. Stoicism doesn't tell you to be unfeeling. It teaches you to see the difference between what is happening and what you've added to it. And when you grasp that, you'll realize no one can truly touch you unless you let them into your mind. 2. The pause is where power is born. There's a narrow space between what happens and how you respond, and that space is where real power lives. It's quiet, not dramatic, and outwardly unremarkable. But inside, it's a silent revolution. When someone insults you and you fire back instantly, you're acting on reflex. But if you pause, even for a breath, you've moved from reaction to intention. That pause might only last a few seconds, but it opens a space for choice. So you're no longer dragged around by old reflexes you'll later regret. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions, but to let them pass like clouds, without handing them the steering wheel. When you pause, you create distance between stimulus and response. In that distance, you can observe the emotion rising, name it, and ask, is this reaction necessary? Does it align with who I want to be? Where will it lead me? When you answer these questions in silence, you're no longer reacting blindly. You're choosing with clarity. Practicing the pause is training yourself to become less manipulable. People who are quick to anger, panic, or outburst are easy to provoke with a few words. But the person who remains calm under pressure disorients their opponent. You don't need to shout to appear strong. True strength lies in refusing to be pulled into someone else's game. And when you don't react, they don't know which direction to go. You've cut the strings they once used to control you. The pause is also a declaration of self-respect. When you don't react immediately, you're telling yourself, my emotions are worth careful consideration. It's like saying, no one gets to push your emotional buttons without your permission. That's not indifference. It's maturity. It's knowing that not everything deserves a response. Not every situation requires your voice, and sometimes, silence is the loudest statement you can make. In practice, you can start applying this in the smallest situations. When someone says something irritating, instead of snapping back, pause and count to 3. When you see a negative comment online, instead of diving into an argument, take a deep breath and ask, will responding to this make me better? In the middle of a heated debate, when passion swells, try holding your tongue for a few seconds. Those moments are chances to build inner strength, not by proving you're right, but by proving you can control yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke. The pause is the tool that allows you to begin that revocation. When you're calm enough not to respond right away, you begin to see what the hasty count, the real intention behind words, the fear behind aggression, what truly matters, and what is merely emotional noise. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you carve a new path in your brain. Each time you remind yourself, we are no longer slaves to our old wiring, we are in command. And real power doesn't lie in what you say or do, it lies in your ability to choose not to, when doing so protects your peace. That small pause, humble yet powerful, is the first step toward becoming the grounded, unshakable version of yourself, calm in the eye of life's emotional storms. 3. Most of what hurts you doesn't come from the outside. Most of what wounds you doesn't come from someone's words. A cold look, a long silence, or a lack of attention. What truly causes pain is the meaning you assign to those events, the story you tell yourself in your head that no one else hears. Someone cancels plans at the last minute, and you immediately think, I must not matter to them, and suddenly feel abandoned. A loved one doesn't praise your efforts, and you feel like you're not good enough. But if you look closely, it was you who colored a neutral event with emotion. And that, more than anything, is the root of your suffering. The human mind operates like a film editor. It receives raw data from the outside world, adds music, overlays effects, writes inner dialogue, and plays it all back like a tragedy. But Stoicism teaches a vital truth. That movie is not reality. It's the product of unchecked mental habits. A blank expression might simply mean someone's tired, yet your mind turns it into rejection. A tactless remark might be thoughtless, not cruel, but you interpret it as a personal attack. The world isn't too harsh. You're just seeing it through a lens cracked by old wounds that were never healed. Since childhood, you were taught to live in a way that pleases others. You were praised when obedient, loved when compliant, accepted when you achieved. Unconsciously, you learn that your worth depends on external approval. And now, when you're rejected, ignored, or criticized, you don't just feel sad, you feel unworthy. But that isn't truth. It's an old belief, planted before you had the power to question it, still quietly steering your emotions. It's not a natural response, it's the product of prolonged conditioning. The issue is no one ever taught you how to look inward. No one told you that sometimes the pain doesn't come from their intent, but from your own unhealed wound. A thoughtless comment might not hurt someone who's whole, but it can cut deep into someone carrying silent shame. So instead of asking, "Why did they do that to me?" ask, "Why did I react so strongly to this?" The answer won't come from the outside world, but from within, the part of you that's waiting to be seen and healed. When you begin to see that most of your pain stems from your own interpretation, you stop feeling like a victim. You start realizing that true freedom doesn't come from changing the world, but from changing how you relate to it. You no longer strive to please everyone, no longer need everything to go your way just to feel okay. You learn to see events through a neutral lens, and from there, choose wiser, calmer responses. Pain is no longer fate. It becomes a gentle knock reminding you need to understand yourself more. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And indeed, we often choose to blame, react, and run, rather than examine the false beliefs within. But Stoicism doesn't let you live that way. It calls you to face, to see clearly, and to slowly untangle. Because only when you're brave enough to look inward can you stop repeating the same painful patterns. You'll realize the world doesn't need to change for you to find peace. You simply need to see this clearly. Most suffering doesn't come from others, but from how you see yourself through them. And when you shift that perspective, you don't just escape pain, you become free. 4. When people know you react easily, you lose power. In any relationship, close or casual, if you react too quickly, too intensely, or too predictably, you lose something crucial: inner power. Because when others realize they can trigger you with just a glance, a word, or a gesture, they can manipulate you without reason. You think you're defending yourself, but in reality, you're handing them a detailed map of how to control you, every emotional button exposed, and they only need to push one for you to lose control. Picture yourself wearing a control panel on your chest, with buttons labeled shame, anger, jealousy, fear of abandonment. Each time you overreact, you're pointing out where those buttons are. Some will steer clear, but others will use them. Especially in toxic dynamics, your emotional volatility becomes a tool for control. They don't need to force you, they just need to keep you confused, scared, or angry, so you stay tangled in the emotions they provoke. Someone just needs to fall silent at the right moment, look at you with half scorn, or say something half joking, and if you get flustered, lose your temper, or start doubting yourself, they've won. While you think you're resisting, you're actually being pulled into their game. Power doesn't lie in who shouts louder. It lies in who stays mentally grounded. And when you let yourself be ruled by reaction, you've surrendered that power without even realizing it. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Don't rush to respond. Don't rush to explain. Don't rush to show you're hurt. When you stay silent, observe, and remain composed, you become unreadable. And when people can't predict your reaction, they can't control you. Being unreadable isn't manipulation. It's a sign of inner strength. When no one knows where your soft spots are, you're no longer an easy target. You begin to regain the upper hand, not through pressure, but through internal stability. What's more, being reactive doesn't just cost you power over others, it costs you power over yourself. Every time you lose your temper, you lose clarity. Every time you feel the need to explain or prove yourself, you're allowing someone else to define your worth. And worst of all, you lose touch with your own thoughts because you've spent so long reacting to theirs. Watch those who are truly strong. They don't speak much, don't argue needlessly, don't fake indifference. They just hold their ground in their eyes, in their breath, in how they listen, and that's exactly what earns respect. Strength doesn't lie in overreaction, but in the ability to not react unconsciously. The more stillness you can maintain in emotionally charged situations, the more you fortify a power no one can reach. Ultimately, you must understand, people only hold power over you when you let them dictate your emotions. They don't seize that power by force. They take it through your predictability and your lack of restraint. And only when you begin to pause at the right moment, respond with intention, and hold your center, do you truly take back control, not through words, not through deeds, but through an unshakable calm that no one can disturb. Unless you allow them, that's quiet power, solid as stone. And once you have it, no one can move you. 5. True strength is the ability to remain silent when you could explode. To stay silent when insulted, misunderstood, or provoked. This is not weakness. It is a rare kind of strength. Quiet, steady, and real. Because reacting is easy. Reacting is instinct. A harsh word, a disrespectful tone, a confrontational act, they can make your blood boil and words rise like reflex. But if in that moment you can swallow them, breathe deeply, and choose silence over shouting, you're not just controlling your actions, you're mastering yourself. Anger, when fed by ego and impulse, will always lead you somewhere you don't want to go. You might release the rage, but you leave behind a crack in the relationship, a stain on your reputation, or worse, a regret you cannot undo. In the heat of anger, it's easy to believe you have to speak up, that if you don't respond, you'll be disrespected. But in truth, when you remain silent and composed, that's when others start to see your power. Not because you intimidate them, but because you refuse to let them control your emotional state. Socrates once said, "He who cannot control himself cannot control anything else." When you're angry and lose control, you're not showing strength, you're revealing your fractures. But when you feel anger rise and still choose not to speak, not to react, you send a clear message to yourself. I decide my actions, not my emotions. And every time you do that, you grow stronger, quietly, without needing to prove it, just steadier than before. Silence. In anger does not mean indifference or passivity. It doesn't mean accepting wrong or submitting to injustice. What it does mean is that you are choosing to respond at the right time, in the right state of mind, when you're calm enough to weigh the consequences, the ethics, and the long-term impact of each word you might speak. Unchecked anger wounds, but silence grounded in clarity can set boundaries, command respect, and sometimes even awaken something in the other person. Modern culture often urges us to speak your mind, stand your ground, and never let them get away with it. But Stoicism reminds us not every emotion needs expression, and not every situation deserves a response. Sometimes you remain silent not because you have nothing to say, but because you know that what you'd say in that moment would not reflect your character, only your temporary anger. And you refuse to let a fleeting emotion write a permanent outcome. True strength is not in suppressing anger, but in letting it pass without letting it steer you. It is a practice, from the first time you hold back a retort to the 10th time you let a provocation slide. Each time, you are rewriting old reflexes, shaping a steadier version of yourself. And one day, when someone tries to spark conflict and you simply don't join in, you'll realize timely silence is your refusal to let them impose their power on you. No rebuttal needed, just your calm, unmoved presence. And that is true strength. 6. Not everything deserves a reaction. Not everything that happens needs your reaction. Not every annoyed look requires questioning. Not every sarcastic remark deserves a comeback. And not everyone who brushes your pride is worth your explanation. This may sound countercultural, especially in an age that glorifies quick responses, constant commentary, and always having a voice. But Stoicism teaches a deeper lesson. You don't have to play every game others invite you into. Imagine someone who waves their sword in the street every day, ready to battle anyone who says something off. Every small issue becomes a fight, every disagreement a war. That person may seem bold, but in truth, they are exhausted. Each time you let your mind be pulled into what's trivial, a vague message, an unclear comment, an empty rumor, you trade your peace for the illusion of a well-timed comeback. But the truth is, you don't have to. You can choose to do nothing at all. Once you understand the value of stillness, you start choosing differently. You're no longer driven by impulse, no longer swept up by others' tempo. You begin to tell the difference between what requires your attention and what is just noise. Harsh judgment from someone who doesn't know you? Noise. A disapproving look from someone who plays no real role in your life? Noise. An unexplained silence? Perhaps just noise. When you stop reacting to noise, you preserve a vast amount of energy and redirect it toward things that truly matter. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're mature enough to see that reacting now won't lead to anything useful. It's control, not apathy. It's deliberate action, not surrender. When you choose silence in the face of provocation, it's not because you're out of words. It's because you know that what doesn't nourish your mind isn't worth shaping your speech. And every time you refuse to react to the petty, you're doing something profound, protecting the clarity of your inner world. Stoicism calls this apatheia, a state of inner calm, where you're no longer tossed around by minor emotions, no longer granting insignificant things access to your serenity. Others may say you're cold, detached, or emotionless, but they don't understand. You've chosen wisdom over impulse. You are not a stone, but you are a stone that doesn't shake easily. Your lack of reaction isn't avoidance. It's the quiet declaration that says, I decide what's worth my energy. The sad thing is, society now teaches that everything must be addressed, replied to, reacted against, fast. But what comes in haste rarely comes from wisdom. You don't need to win every debate, don't need to justify yourself in every conversation, don't need to explain every misunderstanding. A strong person isn't the one who always has the last word. It's the one who can stay silent when needed, who can step back with composure, and who understands this. Not reacting is still a response, and sometimes it's the wisest one. 7. Begin with the small things. No one becomes awakened overnight. No one suddenly becomes unshakable in the face of adversity. And no one gains full control over their emotions from a single moment of insight. Calmness, inner strength, and the ability to remain unmoved by nonsense, all are the result of a journey that begins with small steps. It is not a radical transformation in a day, but the slow accumulation of small, repeated choices, each one moving you closer to self-mastery. You don't need to wait for a crisis to begin training. Even in the most ordinary situations, you can start building your inner strength. For example, when your phone buzzes with a message that feels passive-aggressive, resist the urge to reply instantly. Let it sit, observe your emotions, take a deep breath, and wait minutes or even hours before responding. This isn't avoidance. It's training your mind to delay reaction and give reason a chance to speak before impulse takes over. Or when someone says something that feels like a personal attack, resist the urge to reply right away. Ask yourself, is this worth taking into my mind? Does this affect my long-term direction? If the answer is no, smile or remain silent. In those moments, you're building a new habit. Not rushing, not reacting, not letting fleeting emotions drive your actions. And each time you succeed, no matter how small, you lay another brick in the foundation of inner stability. Starting small also helps you realize a crucial truth. Most of your suffering doesn't come from the event. It comes from your reaction. A negative comment isn't enough to ruin your peace. But reading it repeatedly, overthinking, getting angry, replying, then regretting, that is what creates chaos in your mind. When you begin to notice the little things, you start seeing clearly the difference between what happened and how I handled it. From there, you can choose not to be perfect, but to be intentional. A very simple yet powerful habit is to count to 3 before responding to anything emotionally charged. 3 seconds might sound short, but it's enough to break the old reflex and reconnect with calm. 3 seconds can stop a heated argument from escalating. It can prevent you from sending an email you'll regret. It can give you time to remember your own worth before you feel the need to prove it through words. And with each 3-second pause, you widen the gap between stimulus and response, what the Stoics called the space of freedom. No small act is meaningless if repeated with attention. A glance you choose not to return, a comment you decide not to make, a step back you take instead of stepping into conflict, all are exercises. And like any skill, calmness must be trained regularly. You can't expect to be composed in great crises if the small daily moments still shake you. Start today. Nothing grand is needed. Just one moment of saying less, one deeper breath, one choice not to react. Let each small act become the foundation of a steady mind. Because once you can hold your peace in the little things, you'll no longer be swept away by the big ones. And one day, you'll realize it was those small, quiet choices that were the beginning of true freedom. 8. Emotional detachment is not indifference. It is clarity. When you remain silent in an argument, stay calm under attack, or keep your composure when criticized, people may think you're indifferent, cold, or heartless, but that's because they don't understand the difference between indifference and intentional emotional detachment. A person who is indifferent doesn't care, doesn't feel, and remains untouched. But someone who has mastered emotional detachment feels deeply, yet doesn't allow those feelings to control them. Emotional detachment is not denial. It doesn't mean you don't feel hurt when betrayed, don't feel pain when insulted, or don't feel disappointment when abandoned. It means you can feel, but choose not to react impulsively. It's the ability to sit with your emotions without letting them steer your behavior. It's knowing there's a wave rising within you, but holding the wheels steady, rather than letting your life drift with the tide. Emotional detachment doesn't mean the heart is gone. It means you know how to guide it. Stoicism calls this apatheia, a state of inner clarity where you're no longer pulled into the emotional currents of others or the chaos of circumstance. It's not emotional numbness, but discernment so sharp that you can recognize what emotion is yours, what has been triggered by the environment, and what isn't worth carrying at all. It's like living in a clean home and knowing when to shut the door. You don't let strangers walk in and make a mess. You don't let every passing emotion enter your mind unchecked. In today's world, where reactions are instant and social media rewards immediate emotional expression, someone who remains composed is often misunderstood. They may be seen as detached, disconnected, or uncaring. But the truth is the opposite. Those who practice emotional detachment often observe most deeply, empathize most sincerely, and respond most wisely. They don't act from urges, but from values. They wait until the mind is calm enough to respond from a place of strength, not from reflex. Emotional clarity does not come from blocking feelings. It comes from no longer needing to prove anything when those feelings arise. You don't need to show anger to prove you're hurt. You don't need to react just to prove your pride still exists. When you truly understand yourself, you no longer let emotions speak on your behalf. Silence, poise, restraint. These are signs of mature emotional intelligence. Emotional detachment is the choice of someone who understands. Not every emotion deserves to be fed. Not everyone deserves your energy, and not every event deserves to touch your core. This is not avoidance. It is deliberate selection. You don't let everything reach you. You don't absorb every chaotic force around you. And in that selectivity, you preserve what most have lost, the clarity of your own mind. I used to be someone who reacted easily. A message left unanswered would linger in my mind. A careless remark would keep me up all night. Deep down, I always felt like someone else was pulling the strings. But then I realized no one had hurt me more than the stories I told myself. When I started observing instead of reacting, choosing silence over argument, stepping back instead of pushing forward, I felt my mind becoming more spacious, more at ease. Not because I had become indifferent, but because I began to see the difference between what's worth my attention and what's just an illusion of the ego. I learned to let go of the need to prove myself and hold on to the need for peace. Every day, I'm still practicing, but each pause, each silent choice, each moment of restraint, these are small steps bringing me closer to an inner freedom I never knew was real. If this message resonates with you, feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next video. In a world that's loud and easily provoked, staying calm isn't easy, but it's absolutely worth it. See you in the next one.